Into Jordan. Here's Michael at the foul line. A shot on Elo. Good! The Bulls win it! They win it!
Where nothing is held back.
Go crazy, folks! Go crazy!
Where nothing is censored.
He did what?
Where nothing is off limits.
She is gone!
Where anything goes. This is Snowman Unfiltered.
Holy Toledo, what a way to finish!
And here's your host, Brian Snow.
What's up, y'all? Snowman here. It's episode 2, the big 2 of Snowman Unfiltered, and had another show planned. I promise you I have. But then Andrew Luck retired, and all the reaction about that kind of set me into a tizzy. Hell, Andrew Luck retiring put me in a tizzy, but for good reason. Mike Debate will join me to break all that down, and to start things off, you'll hear my thoughts on why the Colts messed up, not Andrew Luck. Take a listen. Everything that's happening around one of my beloved teams, the Indianapolis Colts, will be talked about in this episode because I'm completely scrapping what I originally had planned, and the guest that I had planned to have on this episode has been moved to a later episode, so keep up with us on that. Follow us on social media using SNWMN Unfiltered. Don't ask me why I took the vowels out of my nickname. It just seemed to work and it just seemed to fit. And Twitter doesn't give you that many characters for a username. But if you follow us on Facebook, you know where to find us. If you follow us on Twitter, you know where to find us. Just search Snowman Unfiltered. All right, let me get into what I was going to get into. Andrew Luck, at the age of 29, announced his retirement from the Indianapolis Colts due to an injury that he couldn't recover from, or should I say injuries that he couldn't recover from. Now, he had a wonderful, wonderful season last year. The comeback player of the year, which I kind of expected the way he played, especially in leading the Indianapolis Colts to the playoffs, and especially leading them to the division round where they lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. But I want to, there's a few other things I want to get to. I want to say congratulations on a great career in Andrew Luck. And coming out of Stanford, number 1 overall pick of the Indianapolis Colts, in 6 years, he led the league in touchdown passes 1 year. I believe that was 2014. He took the Colts to the playoffs 3 consecutive years and was on his way to a Hall of Fame career, but he couldn't bounce back from the injuries. And Andrew Luck said he was mentally worn down. And then in his press conference, he said something that really struck me and really put everything into focus. What he said was, it was a constant cycle of being injured, rehabbing, coming back. And it's been that way for the last 4 years. Now, I will add this caveat. As I have learned, he had a snowboarding injury, I want to say 3 years ago, that he came clean with the Indianapolis Colts about. I applaud him. And the Colts said, you fessed up, you're good. But he said it also wore him down. and I want to point to an article that was on Yahoo Sports where he opened up about how his torn labrum injury and the rehab within saved his marriage. Because when you're a professional football player, and I've heard many players say this, including Rob Gronkowski, there's so much that is taken out of you physically, mentally, and emotionally. And if you have a family, it's going to be an emotional tear on your family. I completely get it. When you're into something so deep and it pulls you away from your family, I get it. It'll wear anyone down. It'll especially wear a man of Andrew Luck's status down. But a couple things happened that pissed me off. As Andrew Luck was leaving the field this past Saturday night after the Colts preseason game against the Bears, fans were booing him and throwing his jersey at him. Why? Why are you throwing your jerseys and booing the guy that was A, brought in to replace Peyton Manning, B, did the best job he could to replace Peyton Manning, and C, took your team to the playoffs last year? Are you the fans that booed him, and I'm calling them out, are y'all that emotionally invested in Andrew Luck where if he walks away, A, on his own terms, B, when he wants to, and C, because he felt worn down? Are you that invested in a man's success or failure that you boo him as he walks off? It was hard enough for him to announce his retirement. And then you're going to make it even worse by booing him. And Andrew Luck said that it hurt. I don't blame him for walking away. For these fickle-ass Colts fans, the ones that booed him, okay? The ones that booed him. Let me be clear. These fickle-ass Colt fans that booed him as he was walking off the field don't deserve to be NFL fans. They don't. For the simplest of reasons, you don't know how to be a fan. And yes, I know fan is short for fanatic. But at the same time, you're so invested in one person that makes a ton more money than you do as a player compared to a fan. And I mean a ton more money than you do. He makes a ton more money than you do, and you're that invested in his success or failure. I mean, when do we pull ourselves, and I'm speaking as a fan too, when do we pull ourselves away from professional sports, man? I've had to learn to since I became a journalist 23 years ago. Okay? They provide the entertainment. Yes, they get me excited. They make me angry when they make dumb plays, and Lord knows I've seen them. But at the same time, they're humans also. They make mistakes. Andrew Luck is human. Period. Let me say it again for those of you who booed him. Andrew Luck is human. Period. I'm sorry that your fantasy team got blown up in your face. I'm sorry that your predictions got blown up in your face. And I'll talk more about that with Mike Debate here later on in the podcast. But come on, y'all. Have some respect for a man that for 6 years left everything on the field. Tom Brady, the greatest of this generation, and you'll never hear me repeat that sentence. I kid as I say that. Tom Brady himself, who is entering his 20th year, called Andrew Luck a friend. Drew Brees, also in his 20th year, called Andrew Luck a friend. And I think it was Ben Roethlisberger, initial reaction said something that is so poignant and so true. What the fans see is game day on Sunday or Saturday or Thursday or whatever the hell it is. What they don't see is Monday through Friday. The preparations, the hits and practices, the injuries that can occur in practices, the home lives. The home life that happens. Rob Gronkowski said football was getting him down. He injured his quad during Super Bowl 53 and couldn't walk. He knew then it was time to retire. I mean, yeah, Rob Gronkowski seemed like the bionic man. But even he had his breaking point. Andrew Luck reached his breaking point and said, you know what, I'm walking away on my own terms. And this is where I applaud the Colts for not seeking any kind of repayment of the money they gave to Andrew Luck. Signing bonus and a little bit extra from his prorated salary. $24.8 million. They could have sought that. But they didn't. They didn't seek that. They said, the heck with it. You gave us 6 years. That's the least. $24.8 million is the least we can do. And now I move on to Jim Irsay. Jim Irsay, have you not learned your lesson yet? You've ruined not one but 2 quarterbacks. And it's going to take you a while before you get a third one. The mistake you made with Andrew Luck, sir, and the mistake you made with Peyton Manning, sir, is you did not surround them with the one thing that's needed to protect great talents like Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck. An offensive line. General Manager Ryan Magnan, a disgrace. Glad he's gone. Chris Ballard is building this team the right way, and I'm so happy about that. But Jim Irsay, this falls at your feet. You should have known going in when you selected Andrew Luck that your offensive line was terrible, it was porous, and he was going to be running for his life if you didn't address it. You didn't address it until 4 years in. And by that time, he had been running for his life. He'd been beat up. Mobility was taken away from him when you didn't give him an offensive line, man. Makes you wonder about the Colts going forward. Makes you wonder about Jim Irsay. Take the Colts out of the equation. Makes you wonder about Jim Irsay going forward. But Jim Irsay, this falls at your feet for the one reason I will state again. You did not give Andrew Luck nor Peyton Manning at the end of his tenure a sufficient offensive line. That's on you. You bring in skilled players that didn't pan out and you sacrifice draft capital for that. The hell is wrong with you? I just hope that you got enough sense right now, knowing you have to select you're going to have to get another franchise quarterback unless Jacoby Brissette turns out to be said franchise quarterback, and you never know. You never know. But the next number one quarterback that you select, and it may come in the next couple of years, you better have the brains, Jim Irsay, to surround him with the most important thing, an offensive line. That's why you lost not one, but 2 generational quarterbacks. And you lost them in a span of 9 years. That's why Andrew Luck walked away. That's why Andrew Luck chose his life and his family, especially with a baby on the way, over football. And Andrew Luck, I applaud you for that decision. Okay, folks, I had to get some help on the situation with the Indianapolis Colts and Andrew Luck, and I couldn't think of a better person to have on than Mike Debate from Full Press Coverage. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, Brian. Hope everybody's well and hope everything's well on your end as well.
It is, man. It is. All right, let's dive into this. I said on the last segment that losing not one but 2 generational quarterbacks falls at the feet of Jim Irsay and not stepping in and providing them with the most important thing that, Montana had, Young had, Brady has, Breeze has. That's an offensive line.
You're absolutely correct. And, I'm not huge into finger pointing when it comes to stuff like this, but when you take a look at what Andrew Luck had to go through early on in his career since being drafted, coming into the league, being sacked, I think, at an average of 40 times a season. It's amazing. It really and truly is amazing that he was able to stay as upright and as healthy as he was, and the laundry list of injuries that he had as a result of that, you really have to start taking a look at not even so much Irsay as I think Ryan Grigson and the personnel that he had put in place while he was general manager of the Indianapolis Colts. I think you have to start taking a look at some of these guys and saying, you know what, they needed to do a better job of protecting this kid, and unfortunately it took its toll to the point where he just wasn't able to answer the bell any longer. And it's sad because there is a generational talent, like you said, in Andrew Luck that you wish you could have continued to see him play and play at a high level. But you look at the track record, and when I actually took a look at the amount of injuries he's had to endure his entire career in doing research and seeing that, he's played with lacerated kidneys and torn abdomens. I mean, we all knew about the labrum in the shoulder, obviously. That was probably his most high profile and his most debilitating injury. And now with the calf and the knee issues, it was just too much for one man to handle any longer. So you wish the best for Andrew. You hope that he's found the peace that he's been seeking in terms of being able to move on to a new and better life with his family. But yeah, they needed to do a better job of protecting him, and unfortunately, there has to be some blame put on that. It's ironic that he ends up having to call it quits in the year where he may have had his strongest offensive line to date. That offensive line in Indianapolis is very, very stout. So we'll see what happens this year, but it's right now it looks to be Jacoby Brissette time, somebody that I'm quite familiar with up here covering the team in New England.
Yeah, and a lot of people are putting down the Colts already, taking them off of their playoff boards, taking them off of their contention boards. And you and I had a chance to talk before we did this program, and I got 3 words: not so fast.
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, and for all the slack that Jacoby Brissette is going to catch, I know people are throwing around the 4-11 when he was the starter back in 2017. You have to remember that, first of all, that was under Chuck Pagano. And I'm not knocking Pagano. I'm not one of these guys that's going to start harping on him. But I think the coaching staff has been upgraded under Frank Reich. And I think Frank Reich has the ability to maybe call plays and utilize Jacoby Brissette in ways that we didn't see Pagano able to use him. So that's one benefit that he'll have there. Second benefit is the offensive line is much improved from 2017. It's improved every year, really, since Brissette has been there. And the kid can play. I've seen Jacoby Brissette be able to make plays, extend plays with his legs. He does have a pretty good arm. Did a fairly good job up here in New England when Jimmy Garoppolo went down. People forget that he actually started a couple of games up here in New England before being traded away before Tom Brady came back and before Garoppolo went down with an injury. So there is some history there where Brissette is able to play. It wouldn't shock me to see the Indianapolis Colts active in the quarterback market. I mentioned on my podcast the other day that there's a possibility that a guy like Brian Hoyer might be interesting to the Indianapolis Colts in bringing in, if they want someone that can help tutor Jacoby Brissette while he's coming along. They do have Chad Kelly as his backup, so there is some familiarity there. But to me, it's going to be interesting to see how they're able to move forward. But they still have a great defense in Indy, very stout offensive line. Marlon Mack can still run the football effectively, and T.Y. Hilton is a very good receiver. Paris Campbell coming in off of the draft. So there's still a lot of reason to be optimistic if you're an Indianapolis Colts fan. Maybe it's not the pie-in-the-sky Super Bowl aspirations that you had only a few weeks ago with Andrew Luck, but I still think it's wrong to write this team off just based on the fact that he won't be there. I still think there's plenty of talent and enough to build on to make it an interesting season. I still consider them division contenders at the very least.
I still consider them division champions at this point, because you mentioned something that is very, very key. And I talked about it in the last segment, and we talk about it all the time on Snowman in the Morning. The strength of an offensive line. This is the strongest offensive line the Colts have had in a while. On top of that, Marlon Mack as the running back. You can give him the ball 300 times this year. Not one, not two, but three very capable tight ends. T.Y. Hilton on one side, Paris Campbell on the other side. A very stout defense that really came into its own late in the season when they made that magical run to the postseason, picking up a win on Sunday night on the road to get into the playoffs. So if you're writing this Indianapolis Colts team off, it would be a mistake.
Agreed. I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think a lot of people are looking at the initial shock, I think, of just having Andrew Luck not there and having his expertise and his ability. And look, there will be a little bit of a drop-off at the quarterback position. I don't think anybody's arguing that point. Jacoby Brissette is very good, but he's a backup. He's a very good backup, but he's a backup nonetheless. And at this point, to take that step as a starter, there's a lot of indications that he's ready and might be willing to do that, and I think he can. But I also believe that the Indianapolis Colts are going to definitely keep an eye, like I said, on the quarterback market. When you start seeing some of these guys in cut down time or possibly looking for a trade, I know there have been a lot of rumors out there. Some people have mentioned Ryan Fitzpatrick. I don't see that happening. I think Miami would like to utilize him this year, getting Josh Rosen ready to take the reins possibly in 2020. Teddy Bridgewater is a name that's been out there with the New Orleans Saints. I don't know if they'd be willing to part with him, to be honest with you. I think they like having Teddy waiting in the wings in the event that Drew Brees decides that he's done and he'd like to move on as well. So there are definitely advantages and disadvantages to what's going to happen with this team, but right now, if you do head into the season with Brissette as your number one option, and it looks by all accounts that they're going to do that, I think they could be doing a lot worse than Jacoby Brissette right now. I think that he's got the ability to keep this team afloat, and if they do sputter, then they will be active. But yeah, I completely agree. The offensive line, the defense, and the running ability of Marlon Mack is something they're going to be really, really leaning on, especially early, while Jacoby Brissette learns to take the reins of this offense.
And the key position on offense that I want to mention, three very capable tight ends. Mo Alley Cox, Eric Ebron, and they get Jack Doyle back from an injury, and they utilized the heck out of those tight ends last year. I wouldn't be surprised if they did it again this year, if not more so, to ease Jacoby Brissette into the starting quarterback position. So the biggest position for the Colts, besides the offensive line, besides the running back that's going to help Jacoby Brissette, three very capable tight ends.
Well said, and I'm glad that you brought that point up. Let's not forget that Jacoby Brissette was a part of the team that had a very significant reliance on tight ends. Martellus Bennett and Rob Gronkowski were both very much in uniform and ready to go when Jacoby Brissette was playing here in New England. He learned how to utilize tight ends, and that never leaves you. That still stays with you. So he can take that experience of having these guys in training camp, having guys like Gronk and Martellus Bennett, and being able to do that. And he's got a pretty good synergy right now with tight ends in camp with the Indianapolis Colts. You mentioned Ebron. Absolutely. They're going to rely very heavily on him as well. So I completely agree with you on the tight end aspect, and I think that can help Jacoby Brissette ease in, even if he needs a little bit of a learning curve with some of the wideouts they have on this roster.
You mentioned Rob Gronkowski, and I did as well during the last segment, and read something where after Super Bowl 53, football was wearing him down. Of course, he tore his quad during the course of that game, finished the game, could barely walk. And this is a guy that has won multiple Super Bowls, but to have your last game be the Super Bowl, but at the same time, tear you down mentally, that says a lot. And that should open the eyes of the everyday fan as to what these football players go through on a daily basis.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder how many players are going to stop following this type of model where it's simply just you reach a point where it just may not be worth it for some of these guys to continue on and put your body through that extra rigor that you need to happen. I listened to Rob's press conference today, and right before I went on the air on Locked On, and the one thing that kept resonating over and over again with me is he kept saying, I wasn't there. The joy had gone away from football. Mentally, I wasn't ready. I had to be selfish and walk away. I had to get my body right. I had to get right mentally. And it reminded me a lot of what we heard from Andrew Luck on Saturday. It's just the physical rigors of having to go through this type of rehabilitation, this type of just physical pain that they have to play through. I mean, for a guy like Rob Gronkowski to say that the last game that he ever played in the NFL, which he did leave the door open, so a lot of people are buzzing about that up here in New England and saying, oh, that means he's coming back. They're taking bets up here in New England saying, oh, it's going to be November, it's going to be this. My Twitter DMs are flooded with people that are saying, what have you heard? When's he coming back? Well, if you listen to the press conference, that's not what he said. He said that if his body responds and he felt a desire to play football again, he wouldn't close the door to it. But in the foreseeable future, he doesn't see that happening. But again, you heard Andrew Luck say that the joy was gone. He had to step away. These guys are starting to realize that the physical rigors of having to go through an NFL season year after year after year, it takes a toll on your body, it takes a toll on your mind, it takes a toll on your emotions, and it takes a toll on your family as well. You have to think that the Gronkowski family, the Camille Kostic got in Rob's ear, and I'm not saying that they were, a negative influence, but they were a positive influence for Rob. They let him realize that there is so much more to life at this point, and he has to take care of himself first. And that's what I saw in Andrew Luck on Saturday. I think it's absolutely asinine and ridiculous that people are putting him through the ringer for walking away from a game when he made a decision based on what was best for himself. You can't fault him for that. You have to understand what these guys go through. I know a lot of people are I know people are hopping on the timing and saying, well, he should have done this in February or he should have done it in April. Don't do it in August. I think Andrew Luck tried to give it everything he could this year, and it just simply wasn't there. And I don't think he was able to muster it up and say, well, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to see how it goes. I think he realized that it wasn't there, and he called it quits as early as he could figure that out. So, again, it's disappointing because it's a generational talent now that the NFL is going to miss. There's no question about it. But the game moves on without him. And in Indianapolis now, like we opened the show and said, it's Jacoby Brissett's time now in Indianapolis. So we'll see what the kid's got and if he can bring it home.
Gronkowski, Luck, both age 29, when they retired. I want to point to an article that I saw on Yahoo Sports, and it was repeated on other sites, and I know you do your research as I do, and the folks that I have on here. Andrew Luck talked about the year he was away from football, the year plus that he was away from football, rehabbing his torn labrum, and how it saved his marriage because it allowed him to reconnect with his wife. And he said in that article that if I did not have that time and did not focus on reestablishing my connection with my wife that just got married in March, then there would have been some serious issues they may not have come back from. I know that played a big part in Andrew Luck retiring, especially now they have a baby on the way. He's made he's made more than enough money to, have his family taken care of for a lifetime. So I applaud Andrew Luck for walking away when he did for the reasons he did, especially where family's concerned.
Correct. And you absolutely said a mouthful in that regard. He did. He made the decision based on what was best for himself and his family, and you can never fault somebody for doing that. In New England, we've seen Tom Brady year after year come back to the Patriots at age 42. It makes you really, really appreciate the longevity that he's been able to have. And on the Greg Hill Show on Monday morning, when he does his weekly media appearance on WEEI Radio here in New England, he essentially confirmed that he's been extremely fortunate to be able to have the health and the longevity that he's had in his career. And because of that, he's been able to extend that career. Now, you talk about time with family. You're seeing Tom do that a little bit more than he has in the past. I think you start to get up there in age, and you and I both know this, my friend. You start to question and you start to feel your mortality a little bit.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you get up, there's a few more aches and pains than there were ever, in years past. And all of a sudden you start to realize that, I'm mortal. I'm not going to play football forever. I'm not going to live forever. So you need to cherish the people that are around you while they're here. I learned that lesson at a young age in losing my father at a young age. You really need to always take the opportunity to tell the people around you how much they mean to you every chance that you get. And for someone like Andrew Luck, who just made a judgment decision stating that this is going to be what I feel is best for me and my family, again, I can't fault him, and I commend him for that, because it really does take a lot of courage. I think it's just the opposite of what some people are saying, where, he quit and he left the team. I don't think so. I think it took a lot of courage for him to be able to say, I just can't do this anymore. I have to walk away from it, simply because it's just not something that I can give my 110% and my all to every single week. And rather than come in and mail it in and disappoint people even more by not being able to live up to the expectation that he needed, he walked away from the game saying that if I'm not going to give 110%, I'm not going to be out there at all. I'm not going to mail it in for a paycheck. He does have guaranteed money that very substantial, let's face it.
Yeah.
He signed a very lucrative deal. So this is not a guy that, he was playing on a limited deal, or he was playing on a rookie contract, or he wasn't quite making what he was, deserving of. He was the highest paid player on the team. And when you walk away from something like that, I know he's still, going to be handsomely compensated, but he's also leaving a lot of money on the table as well. So, I just think that it was the best decision for him at the time, and having a couple of days to digest it and get over the initial shock of seeing someone 29 years of age say, I can't do this anymore and I'm walking away from the game, it makes perfect sense when you look at the injury history and you look at what he's had to go through. It actually is surprising that he lasted as long as he did based on what he had to go through, at least in my opinion anyway.
Couple of Hall of Famers that retired at an early age. One of them I'm going to mention came back a couple more times and regained his love for his sport, that of course being Michael Jordan. But then the other Hall of Famer I'm going to mention is Steve Young. A concussion took care of him in 1999, and I remember it on a Monday night game against the Arizona Cardinals. Aeneas Williams sacked him and gave him a concussion, and Steve Young walked away after that game. Of course, Michael Jordan retired in 1993 after his father was shot. And different things inside or outside of a person's sport of choice can lead you to walk away. We mentioned Gronkowski, talked about Luck ad nauseum in this episode, but if you want to look at a parallel, all you have to do is draw from some players that realized their own mortality when it came to the sport that they loved and when it came to their life.
Right, absolutely. And, you talk about mortality. I mean, it definitely has. This is not the first time that anybody has walked away from the game seemingly in their prime or their prime years because of reasons that are beyond their control. You mentioned Michael Jordan, and that's a great example. I'll raise you one and then go to Magic Johnson. In 1991, walking away from the game where he seemingly had everything to live for. There was still such a great desire on his behalf to want to play the game, and he walked away from something because of something that he essentially had no choice with. I mean, with that type of diagnosis, I remember seeing that as a young child. I was probably maybe 11 years old when Magic announced his retirement, and thinking, Magic's going to die. He's not going to be here much longer. This is what we really thought at the time. We had no idea about HIV, AIDS. It really wasn't the education that's out there now.
Right.
Simply wasn't there, nor was the treatment. It really seemed like a death sentence at the time. And those types of tragedies where you look at something like that, and then, of course, you can even get into athletes that were cut down in their prime, that were cut down during their playing years. That's a completely different, circumstances. And again, you mentioned Steve Young, but Steve Young also, guys like Barry Sanders, Calvin Johnson, these guys came to the realization that they needed to walk away at times where most people believe there was still a lot of life left in their legs, but they made a judgment call and said to themselves that they had put their body, they had put their emotional well-being up to the limit that they possibly could have, and they had simply had enough. And at that point, when you have had enough mentally, physically, emotionally, then it's time to walk away. And I think that's what we've seen with Andrew Luck here. It would shock me to see him come back. From what I've heard from him on Saturday, it seems like a gentleman that has very much made peace with his decision. And although it's not something that he really wanted, I think it's something that he can live with and that he's comfortable with.
Mike DeBay joins me talking all things Andrew Luck and the Indianapolis Colts. Folks, don't write these Colts off, all right? I'm telling you, don't write them off. They're in good hands with Jacoby Brissette. I still believe that they are going to be the kings of the AFC South. Catch Mike DeBate every day, the host of Locked On Patriots on the Locked On Podcast Network, and you can catch him each week on my show, Snowman in the Morning, and we'll do some NFL musings. We'll work them in each week on this podcast. A pleasure, my friend, and thank you so much.
Always a pleasure joining you, Brian. Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day, bud.
That's going to do it for this week's episode of Snowman Unfiltered. Don't forget to visit us online, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, and wherever you get your best podcasts, be it Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and others. And if you missed it, just go to arenasportsnet.com/snowmanunfiltered to see the entire episode list. And believe me, we're building an episode list. Till next time, have a great day. God bless. Remember to make your next move your best move. And always remember, if your dreams don't scare you, then they are not big enough. Dream big, do bigger. I am, and I hope you are too. Till next Wednesday, Snowman out.